I was in the middle of a client meeting when the lobby doors burst open with such force that several people turned to look. There stood Karen Miller, the president of our neighborhood HOA, her face flushed with what I could only describe as vengeful delight. She stormed across the marble floor in her designer heels, pointing a manicured finger directly at me as my clients looked on in confusion. "You're fired, effective immediately," Karen announced loudly, her voice echoing throughout the lobby. "Pack your things and get out of my building within the hour." I felt my cheeks burn as every eye in the lobby turned toward us. My clients shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but I managed to maintain my composure. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, a smug smile spreading across her face as she relished my public humiliation, but there was something she didn't know, something that made me straighten my shoulders and meet her gaze. Without flinching, I simply nodded and said, "I think there's been a misunderstanding, Karen." Her eyebrows shot up at my calm response. "The only misunderstanding is that you thought you could stay employed here after your pathetic performance. Now get out before I call security." Just 6 weeks earlier, I had been working as a modest financial advisor in this very office building. It wasn't glamorous, but I enjoyed helping clients manage their investments and plan for retirement. Karen, however, made the workplace nearly unbearable. She wasn't just the president of our neighborhood HOA where we both lived, she was also the office manager for our building, a position that gave her 2 platforms from which to exert her love of control. Karen micromanaged everything from the temperature in the break room to which parking spaces employees could use. If you dared to question her authority, you'd find yourself written up for insubordination or suddenly dealing with surprise HOA violation notices at home. I had watched talented colleagues quit rather than deal with her petty tyranny, but my situation had changed dramatically, though no one at work knew it yet. My uncle had passed away 2 months ago, leaving me a substantial inheritance that I had decided to invest in real estate. When I discovered that the very building where I worked was up for sale, it seemed like a perfect opportunity. I formed a holding company to maintain my anonymity and made an offer that was quickly accepted. The closing was scheduled for the following week, but I had kept this information completely confidential, continuing to work as usual while the paperwork was being finalized. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. She had begun sending daily emails about workplace etiquette violations and installing security cameras aimed directly at employee workstations. At our monthly HOA meeting, she had pushed through arbitrary new rules about holiday decorations and lawn maintenance schedules, finding residents for infractions as minor as leaving a garbage can out for an extra hour. When my neighbor Mrs. Peterson, a 70-year-old widow, broke down in tears over a $500 fine for unapproved garden plants, I knew something had to change. Last week, Karen had cornered me in the break room, accusing me of violating office decorum by bringing clients through the front entrance instead of the side door. "This isn't some low-rent operation," she had hissed, jabbing her finger toward my chest. "Maybe if you showed more professionalism you wouldn't be stuck in that tiny office forever." I had simply nodded and apologized, which only seemed to frustrate her more. What she didn't realize was that I had just signed the final paperwork that morning. The building was officially mine now. Standing in the lobby with Karen demanding I leave immediately, I could feel the weight of the building deed in my portfolio. I gathered my client's paperwork and calmly stood up. I apologized for the interruption. I told them quietly, "Perhaps we can reschedule for tomorrow morning." After they left, Karen stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I've been waiting to do that for months. You have no ambition, no vision. People like you are just stepping stones for people like me." I nodded, maintaining my professional demeanor. "You might be surprised, Karen." I walked toward the exit, pulled out my phone, and deliberately called my lawyer within earshot. "Hi, James. Yes, everything went through. The building is officially mine as of 9 a.m. this morning. Could you please have the new management notices prepared for tomorrow? Thank you." I glanced back to see Karen frozen in place, her mouth slightly open as the implications of my conversation dawned on her. Without another word, I walked out the door. The next morning, I arrived early with the property management team. We posted notices throughout the building effective immediately. Smith Properties is the new owner of Oakwood Professional Center. All building management inquiries should be directed to the new property manager, David Williams. At precisely 9 a.m. I watched from the new security monitors as Karen approached the main entrance and swiped her access card. The light remained red and the doors stayed locked. She tried again, then began pounding on the glass doors. The security guard approached, pointing to the new management notice. I could see her face contort with anger as she read it. When David finally let her in to explain the situation. Karen stormed past him and headed straight for her office, only to find the locks had been changed. By this time, a small crowd of employees had gathered in the lobby watching the scene unfold with barely concealed fascination. "Where is he?" Karen demanded, spinning around to face the crowd. "Where is that nobody who thinks he can play games with me?" I stepped forward from my position near the elevator. "Good morning, Karen. I believe David was explaining the change in management." She laughed, but it came out more like a strangled gasp. "This is some kind of sick joke. You can't afford to buy this building." I smiled gently. "Actually, Smith Properties is my holding company. I purchased the building last week, and the transfer of ownership became official yesterday morning, about an hour before you attempted to fire me." The color drained from Karen's face as she processed this information. "That's impossible. You're just a financial advisor. You drive a 10-year-old Honda." "I believe in living below my means," I replied calmly, "but that's neither here nor there. As the new owner, I've hired a professional management company to oversee building operations. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately." Karen's shock quickly gave way to rage. "You can't do this to me. I've managed this building for 7 years. I'll sue you for wrongful termination." "You're welcome to speak with my attorneys," I said, handing her a business card, "but you should know that I have extensive documentation of your management practices, including testimony from employees about workplace harassment and intimidation. Now I need to ask you to vacate the premises. Your personal belongings will be packed and delivered to your home address." That's when Karen completely lost control. She started screaming obscenities, her face turning an alarming shade of red. She grabbed a potted plant from the reception desk and hurled it across the lobby, narrowly missing an elderly client who had just walked in. Then she turned to the reception computer and shoved it off the desk, sending it crashing to the floor. "This is my building," she shrieked, knocking over chairs as she moved toward the reception desk. "Mine. You're all fired, every single one of you." David immediately called security while I tried to calm the situation. "Karen, please stop. You're only making things worse for yourself." She spun toward me, eyes wild with fury. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Well, I'm still the HOA president. I'll make your life a living nightmare. I'll find every violation on your property and fine you until you're bankrupt." Security arrived quickly, but when they attempted to escort Karen out, she slapped one of the guards across the face. At that point, David had no choice but to call 911. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived and attempted to reason with Karen, who was now barricaded behind the reception desk, threatening anyone who came near. When the officers approached, Karen tried to shove past them toward me, screaming that she would destroy me. The officers had no choice but to restrain her, and despite her struggles and protests, she was handcuffed and informed that she was being arrested for disorderly conduct, destruction of property, assault, and trespassing. As the officers led her toward the exit, Karen continued to shout threats and promises of retribution. The entire lobby fell silent as the doors closed behind them, the echo of her threats still hanging in the air. The following week, Karen appeared in court and was charged with 3 misdemeanors. The judge, clearly unimpressed with her continued insistence that she was the victim, sentenced her to 100 hours of community service, ordered her to pay $7,000 in damages to the building, and issued a restraining order preventing her from coming within 100 feet of the building or contacting any of its employees. But the final blow came from the HOA board itself. An emergency meeting was called, and with footage of Karen's arrest circulating among residents, the board voted unanimously to remove her as president. When informed of the decision, Karen collapsed into her chair, mouth opening and closing wordlessly as her last vestige of power was stripped away. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen was completely speechless.